You're listening to Impact S.E.A. Episode 1, The State of Impact by Startups in Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia is a rising economic powerhouse with $9.34 trillion in combined GDP in 2019. That's close to two-thirds of China's GDP. But are sustainability and impact efforts sufficient in matching the trajectory in GDP growth? And what can technology startups do to improve in the growth of impact efforts? In today's inaugural episode, I speak to Fang Eu-Lin, partner, PwC Singapore, and sustainability and climate change leader. Hi, Eu-Lin. Nice to meet you here today, and thank you so much for being on our inaugural podcast of Impact S.E.A. You put on your title, Sustainability and Climate Change Leader. Is your work all about just saving the earth? Tell us more.
Oh, it's great to be here, Chris, and thanks for having me in your inaugural podcast. I should be the one that is very, honored to be here. But I think, that's really just a title, but, maybe I could share a little bit more about the stuff that we do at PwC in the sustainability and climate change team. Likewise with other professional firms, we offer, sustainability services or consulting services as well. And, we really strive to apply our global deep knowledge and expertise to find solutions for an issue. Actually, if you take a step back and what's really PwC's purpose, right? Our tagline is to build trust in society and solve important problems, helping the so-called actors in the society, is it business or government, in solving sustainability and climate issues. And it's really an important problem that we want to try to solve. But we can't solve these issues in a sort of like a broad manner. These issues are really not easy. I'm really glad that you mentioned to me that more of the startup space, want to look into these issues as well. It's not easy, but it's great that we have more stakeholders involved. It requires science, data, good governance, and ideas as well. Ideas which we think, that can percolate from the startup industry. So that's why part of our work, involves really making sure that organizations across the ecosystem get the foundations right. And what do I mean by that? They measure their carbon footprint. They have a realistic plan for decarbonization. They assess physical and transitional risks of climate change. They look at policies across not only environmental, but social and governance as well. They look to green finance to help them to grow. They help and also to develop regulations, amongst others. So That's in a nutshell what I do. There's a lot more, but I just thought just to give you just a bit of an insight on that one.
It's actually sincerely quite overwhelming hearing so much of it. I remember there was a little conversation that we had previously where you introduced me about sustainability, and you mentioned something about the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. Are you able to just help explain a little bit more about how sustainability and impact in Southeast Asia mean to you based on this kind of framework?
Yeah, I'm really glad that you mentioned about the UN SDGs. They have a goal, as you mentioned, it's like 17 goals, right? They've really simplified it. Yeah. It's a great and well-accepted platform to identify what are the needs of different countries. And this platform helps you to set goals, set targets, and also how to measure this progress within for these 17 goals. But as I said, they simplify it into 17 UN SDGs. But underneath that, right, there are 169 targets, right? Each of them, I guess have a different importance in different jurisdictions. So maybe just to layer it a little bit more, right? So under SDG 4, which is equitable education. Under that, you have a target, which is 4.3, which is to afford the affordable technical, vocational, tertiary, and university education. And then underneath that is how do you measure it, right? Which is 4.3.1, which one of it is participation rate of youth and adults in formal and non-formal education, and also by gender. So actually quite detailed. So the UN SDGs are detailed. They're not purposely detailed. They need to be like that so that they can be effective. I guess the other thing that I really appreciate about the UN SDGs, which I alluded on earlier, is that it helps you to identify what are the greatest needs in respective countries. And also in Southeast Asia, as you mentioned. So maybe if you bear with me, right, we have this really cool tool by PwC called the UN SDG Selector. And it helps to just, I guess, organize the data so that you can see, right, by different countries, also in Southeast Asia, what are the greatest SDG needs. So in Indonesia, it could be SDG 5, which is gender equality, SDG 6, clean water and sanitation, SDG 15, life on land. And in Myanmar, you have SDG 1, which is no poverty, SDG 2, zero hunger, SDG 4, education, just to name a few. So coming back to, since this is a podcast on startups, right, and an impact, if you really wanted to make an impact on Southeast Asia, there's so many opportunities. And the SDGs is a great platform, is a great tool to be able to, I guess, guide you in how to actually go into the areas that will help you to make the impact at the same time, I guess, allow your startup to flourish.
Wow, that's really a lot of great information, that you have just shared. I think maybe to help our audience a little bit more, what do you think are your two favorite major issues in Southeast Asia that you think startups should be focusing on?
The issues in Southeast Asia and around the world, they are far too complex and they are far too variegated to say that, oh, these are the major issues or these are the minor issues. I'll give you an example. In Indonesia, the issues in Jakarta, for example, is very different from another province, say like Jambi, right? And if you drill, let's say you use the tool, the SDG tool, you'll find that if you go down deeper, the needs of the population and environment in Jakarta are very different from Jambi. So I don't think that there are, just a bunch of major issues that Southeast Asia face. So I think you will need to do a bit more research in depending on which jurisdiction that you are going to be wanting to actually offer your services. Another point I wanted to make as well, right, is that actually this whole area is moving very fast, so the issues evolve from time to time. I think COVID-19 has actually had a big impact on this as well. I think it's a reset, and we can do things better, build back better, given this reset. But I just wanted to make a point that many have heard about Nassim Taleb's black swan, right? But many also in the community think that actually, are you sure that COVID-19 is a black swan? Many share the view that actually COVID-19 is actually a grey rhino, right? And what do I mean by a grey rhino? So a grey rhino is, something that's big, presumably, far away at first, right? But it's still charging, towards you. And people have been warning in the past about this, and a real possibility of this happening, a grey rhino. And actually, many view that climate and sustainability is another grey rhino, but a much bigger grey rhino. The science points to it. We're already seeing signs of it. But what are we going to do about it, right? I mean, back to questions, why is it that we should be focusing on? I think many people are trying to focus on how is it that we can build back better. I mean, in Singapore as well, they got the Emerging Stronger Task Force. They're also thinking about how to build back better. One of the streams is sustainability, which is great. You've got lots of resources available so that investors, right, or startups can actually think about where is it that can actually go into, which is a flow area rather than ebb area, and where is it that can make the most impact. So I mean, just a quick one, right? There was a recent report that came out in June 2020 from the IMF and the IEA. It's a very good read, only 174 pages
Only.
on sustainable recovery. In this literature, right, they describe what governments and businesses can focus on when we build back better. The information is pretty rich, right? And they also show or did some research about what are the areas, right, where you can create the most jobs per $1 million spent, right? And also, and what are the abatement costs, right? Cost to reduce, carbon emissions, right, per CO2 ton. So, if you look at, I want to build back better, go into areas which, can create jobs, right? At the same time, I can create jobs but reduce the carbon footprint, right? It points to a few areas. So, the study shows that, some of the areas, unsurprising, is like solar PV utility, right, which helps to address those two dimensions. And then there's also a book that was recommended by a good friend called Drawdown, which looks at the different types of green solutions or sustainable solutions, and what are the pros and cons, the cost of each as well. But coming back to your question, I'm sorry, it's a long-winded answer to your question, but there is just so much out there, and also in Southeast Asia to do. There are lots of opportunities. But I think one, if you are trying to set up a business or pivot to another area, I think you need to be very up to date about the changing environment of these issues. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for all that powerful resources that you were mentioning about different reports. I'll definitely make sure that, we'll put all those resources at the bottom of all the posts for people to go and click on. I just wanted to sidetrack aside a little bit on the point that you mentioned about COVID-19 being a gray rhino. Now, here's a very big question that everyone's always been asking. Has COVID-19 also started to impede sustainability efforts going forward? Because this has been do you consider this a distraction? Do you consider this as an impediment, or do you consider this as even an acceleration for sustainable kind of efforts that we are doing now?
Some people are saying that, now that COVID has happened, our carbon footprint should be smaller, and therefore we don't really need to do that much anymore, right? So I would have to say that if you look at the net carbon reduction during the COVID period, is expected to be about 8%, right? And this is contributed by, as I say, it's net because you have a huge reduction in terms of the air transport, obviously, right? And but you also have and also transportation, and also office buildings to a certain extent. But what's increasing is, of course, our home home footprint. But net is about 8%, right? And I think that in the past, right, where we have gone through economic crises, and I'm not saying that COVID-19 is a similar economic crisis. COVID-19 is very special. It is a healthcare issue that has turned into an economic crisis, which might turn into a humanitarian crisis. So it's different. But I'm just taking a lead from, the previous financial crisis, and it shows that after when economy starts to open up, businesses starts to grow again, the carbon footprint actually accelerates hugely, right? So this is a chance for us during this period to say, how is it that we can, build back better, right? Not go through the same other financial crisis, right, where we see a huge uptick in terms of carbon emissions. So I would say that some people said that yes, maybe we don't need to do too much anymore. I think we need to go back to the data and also history to see how human beings will also react. And given that those 2020 hindsight moments, and no pun intended, how is it that we can change this time around?
I guess, with this whole COVID-19 and with sustainability solutions all coming into play, for yourself, you have been exposed to a number of solutions. Have you ever seen any creative tech solutions by startups, in resolving issues like perhaps with COVID-19 or anything that is within the sustainable impact in Southeast Asia? What are your two favorites?
I'm seeing really quite a fair bit of interesting startups in, say, the meat substitutes area.
Meat substitutes, okay.
Yeah. So it could be seafood substitutes, for example, right? And on the newspaper today in Straits Times, was it yesterday? They talked about milk substitutes as well, right? So I think Singapore is quite focused on the food and agri area, and I think that there been quite a lot of good startups in this area as well. And the other point is also we have to, I guess, leverage what we're really good at, and education is something that we're really good at, right? Is that something that we can do more of, more at tech companies, perhaps? Yeah.
That is really good. Taking a follow-on question to that, how would you measure the impact and effectiveness of meat substitute companies? Are you able to give us like an idea of what exactly are the KPIs in impact measurements should we be looking at?
I do a lot of work in terms of impact, and I have to say it is no walk in the park if you want to measure impact properly. Firstly, you need to, I guess, establish what is it that you're trying to achieve, right? You need a goal, a target. So SDGs provide you that goal, but other than that, do you have your own goal? So in the climate area, you've got science-based targets, right? Which I guess helps you to define what really should be your targets in your given industry or the organization that you're in. Then you really need to go into differentiate what are the outputs, the outcomes, and then the impact. You need to get good data to be able to measure this impact. You need to get good data to actually understand what are the counterfactuals as well. So some folks think that, oh, okay, impact is just a simple assessment, right? But sometimes people think they get it confused, impact between impact and also outputs or outcomes. But not to worry, there's a lot of good literature out there. Say, for example, if a startup wants to go into something like, a sustainable solution or a green solution, and they want to start to measure the impact because that they also want to show, right, during when they exit, for example, right, the impact that they've made. A good framework would be, or platforms would be like the Global Impact Investing Network. Many have heard of that, and also the Impact Measurement Management Project, right, which are used by many investors. So that looks at the what, who, how much contribution and risk of impact as well. So I would say that if you really want to be serious in this area of impact as part of your business, you need to start getting good frameworks and also good data to help you to measure your impact.
Well, thanks much for that. I'm just thinking through, one of the challenges for startups, they are very resource constrained.
Mm-hmm.
How much do you think enough is enough, in terms of an example of producing the impact literature, the impact measurements, because I guess a number of them, when they saw the impact frameworks, they found a lot of information is needed to be put in. Is it maybe possibly just looking at just 4 to 5 areas for measurements, if I might say, KPIs are sufficient, or because the current frameworks that I've been seeing so far, like you said, I think there was some with about 170 over KPIs. And I think that really frightens off a startup when they talk about we want to go into impact. What do you think is the best middle ground, for them to kickstart in a very comfortable manner?
I do think that they need to probably come up with a few, right, which is I guess aligned to their business, right. You don't need to, I guess, do 10 or 20 at the outset, but starting with a few would be good and then adding on over the years. After a while, you need to look at the materiality as well, right? Which are the material ones? Because everything else, if you handle these few, it could be just 2 or 3, right? But if they're material enough, I think that's something that you can just continue to measure. But I understand and I empathize that in startups, people are doing, is one person doing many jobs at the same time. I recognize that. But I think that the good thing about the whole impact world, the whole sustainability world, is that there is a lot of literature out there. So you do have information for you to just do it yourself, right? As I said, based on materiality, identify those which are material for you, and then stick to those. Add on if you must, as your business changes as well.
That's very, very good advice. And I actually wanted to move to the last question that I have for you today. What other advice do you have for startups who are very interested in working with businesses in Southeast Asia? What do you think is the best way to showcase and to portray impact to businesses. Because as you know, businesses in Southeast Asia are still very traditional in nature. For them, it's more about financial survival rather than impact. Is there any advice that you can give to startups, and how they work with businesses here?
I do think that the world is changing. So whilst it's correct, is financial sustainability is very important because that creates jobs, right? But to completely ignore, the sustainability impact aspects also, I think is dangerous. We are increasingly, and I'm sure yourself as well, managing sustainability as both a business opportunity and also being able to have a license to carry out business. There are lots of regulations coming up which require more sustainable solutions. And if you are, for example, like carbon tax, right, requires you to, I guess, improve, in terms of your energy efficiencies across the value chain. So if you're not really ready for these regulations, that I believe there will be more and more sustainability related regulations, then it might put you on the back foot. And at the same time, I think that you would have to manage all these impact kind of expectations, right? And also sustainability risks. Even if you are wanting to you're starting up a business in the sustainable or green business. So I can give you an example of quite a recent one where there was a solar company that was being built in a developing country, doing very well. This is a green business, right? Solar PV. But the business itself was not sustainable, did not consider other sustainability risks such as taking care of workers' needs or the unions. And what had happened was that the workers revolted and they started to smash the solar panels. So not looking at your ESG risks or the way you impact, right, the community as a business might also impact your own business, even though your business might be a green or sustainable, offering green or sustainable solutions. I guess the final point is that many investors, if you look at the sovereign wealth funds, the pension funds, they have all put it out there, that they're very serious about the companies who create impact, right? Even the type of private equity or VCs, they are serious about this. Many of them actually subscribe to the UN Principle of Responsible Investments as well, UNPRI. And because of this, right, of their mandate and also their alignment to the UNPR, they're looking at ESG or impact, right, from a due diligence lens as well. We are getting more and more impact funds out there as well. And at the same time, as over and above, due diligence, okay, I think they also have expectations of an ongoing basis, the ESG and impact practices of their potential investee companies as well. So I would say that, back to your question about advice, right? I think, yes, financial sustainability is very important, but not to look at the other aspects of impact and also ESG might be a risk to you as well. And might be risk to you, when you want to, grow your business bigger, want to get in more investors also, because the tides are changing.
Oh, thank you so much for all this that you have shared with us today. Really, thank you, Eu-Lin.
My pleasure.
You've been listening to Impact S.E.A, a podcast focused on impact technology investing in Southeast Asia. To share your views in future podcasts or invest into my fund in impact technology startups, contact me at christopherquack.com or trive.vc.